as we prepare for the departure of Boris and a new Prime Minister, Hugh and myself thought it's sensible to have a live chat about it all. So, hello, Hugh. Are you all excited about it? Glued to the TV, hanging on to every utterance by every candidate?
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? Because the utterances from every candidate are boringly similar.
Yes.
It seems to be, how pure can I be in relation to Brexit? And how can I garner more votes by being ever more, Brexit clean, as it were? It is very odd, and I think that the race is obviously on for the second candidate. It looks as if Mr. Sunak is going to become one of the candidates to go to the final two. But who is going to be the next one? And it's a very interesting lineup, really. I think everyone's been quite surprised by the rise of Penny Mordaunt, and rather surprised by the immediate exit of Nadeem Zahawi and Jeremy Hunt.
Jeremy Hunt, yeah. I must tell everybody we're recording this on the Thursday, whilst we're awaiting the outcome of the second vote, which is due probably an hour or so after we've finished the recording. So let me ask you then, Hugh, will Brexit be a lasting Boris sound legacy or a Boris-caused disaster for the UK? What's your thoughts?
I think it's certainly going to be a legacy. And I think it will depend on who succeeds Boris as to whether it's a success or an abject failure. I think one of the problems is that the country, the civil service and ministers have all got bound up by actually thinking, well, we can't speak ill of Brexit because we've invested so much political capital in it. And therefore, undoing Brexit just can't be contemplated. But at the same time, how you actually move it forward, I think, is a real problem. You only have to look at the Northern Ireland Protocol before you see you start tinkering with it, and you end up with all sorts of unforeseen consequences, political and economic. And I think this is going to be the defining theme of the next government, however long or short that might be, and it's going to rumble on for years. So, to say, is Boris's defining legacy Brexit? Yes, it is. But how successful that legacy will be is very much open to question.
You see, what puzzles me at the moment is that businesses are nowhere near being ready. I got a letter in this morning, or a very thick letter from Zurich, where my personal pension is there, and saying, well, we're having to change it and split our company because of European, and it's got to go through the High Court, and it's going to drag on for ages. And then at the same time, today I've just had an email in from our accountant saying that as from September, HMRC are changing all the process on export and import, and you now need to register on this, to do that, to do the other, and get all the new process. So, it's not like anybody's ready to get doing things, is it?
No, it's not. And I'm old enough to remember when we actually joined the single market.
Right.
And the preparation for that was detailed. It was prepared. Businesses knew what they were up for. The single administrative documents, you remember that? Which meant that everything was streamlined and simple. And now, having had nearly 50 years in the single market, it all has to be undone. And political people think that it can be just done by the wave of a pen or Harry Potter's wand. And it can't be, because our whole life economically has been bound up with simplicity of trade in Europe. That's been undone, but I don't think the architects of that have appreciated how really complicated it is. And, Brexit isn't done. For Boris to claim Brexit's done, it's not. There are so many things that have to be worked through in detail. How on earth are we going to get competitiveness in UK agriculture without access to labour? These things haven't been thought through sufficiently, and they will rumble on for years. In the meantime, we're not as competitive as we once were, and that's going to have a long-lasting effect on our position in the world, our position in the G20, and our position in Europe. You can't ignore your biggest trading bloc.
No,
and
no,
for
no.
politicians to think that you can is naive.
I think let's just stay on that labour challenge there, because as you know, one of my core industries, well, 50 years in it this year, is hospitality. And there's something approaching, people are estimating nearly 250,000 chef vacancies in the UK. And that's before you start to try to find waiters and other people to work in hospitality. And businesses are just crumbling. Because they can't deliver the service that is necessary for example, to meet food standards and so on. So where are we going to go to with core sectors like hospitality, which produces billions a year for the UK?
Well, I think that is a particular problem, because Europeans had hospitality in their core DNA. And, you can count legions of pubs and restaurants that are only opening 3 days a week because they can't staff it for the rest of the time. That means that they can't rely upon a loyal clientele to come and, pop in for a dinner or a bar snack or whatever, because they can't open.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if you look at where we are getting our labour from now, it's places from as far afield as Vietnam, some African countries. They don't have hospitality in their DNA. That's not to say they're not good workers, but they have to be trained up from scratch. The advantage that we had of free movement of people is that we could tap into a vast labour pool who were skilled, willing, and worked hard.
Yes.
We've got to really train up everybody all over again, and that takes time and money.
Yeah, now that's the important bit, the time and the money. Let's go back to the vying candidates that we have at the moment for PM, because to me, they all seem to have some ideological stance, such as trust, as though trust has just been invented and will be the new magical potion. Surely trust and integrity should be the bedrock of politics. And what the country wants to hear about from these people is economic solutions, solving inflation, and businesses want to see, when will we start to get some benefits from Brexit?
Well, I think that's right. And I think it's really interesting that everyone's talking about trust as if it was some shiny new pendant in the jewel box. Of course, it's not. And the fact they are talking about it is they have cottoned on to the fact that it's really important. And the fact that they're talking about it in such a way indicates how far we have gone as a nation in actually eschewing trust, that we've actually put it away and say, oh, it's too complicated to deal with. Of course, it's not. And the fact that all the candidates are dealing with integrity and trust and their abilities in that area, I think says a lot about the previous Prime Minister's credibility. Because they recognize.
But they voted for him. They supported him. They were condoning it, surely.
Well, maybe they weren't condoning it, but they were certainly going along with it, because to oppose it would be too difficult. But I think, you raised a really interesting question here, and that is how far, business really is concerned. You have business organizations saying to the Conservative Party, we need a long-term strategy to enable this country to compete in the world. Well, Boris's attitude towards business was F business, and that. Yeah. And therefore, I think the relationship that the government has with business has been really badly damaged. And there's a lot of work to be done to rebuild credibility with the business sector, because when you think about it, it's business that actually pays the government's taxes. Yeah. It's business that funds the health service. It's business that funds the provision of the armed forces. All these things are taking place, and it's business that pays for them. And if business doesn't think it's getting a good deal, then it's going to try and seek the outcome of the political, the elections and the choice of leader of each party, because it's vital to them that we actually have a government that is sympathetic and encouraging to business, not one that treats it as the goose that lays the golden egg, because the golden eggs run out.
Yeah. Well, let's just go to another worry that's sort of pervading over us at the moment. And there's lots of surveys coming out saying that CEOs around the world, their biggest concern at the moment is inflation. And I know that's something you understand much better than I do. So what's your thoughts about it here, and relevant to the UK growth?
Well, I think we have to start by saying that inflation is global. It's not limited to the UK. And therefore that all countries around the world are suffering from inflation of one sort or another, from the rice farmer in Bangladesh, who has to pay more for seeds, fertilizer, and indeed labor and fuel, to a sophisticated pharmaceutical business in this country that whose wage bill's going up, fuel is going up, and the availability of labor is going up, but will be becoming more constrained. And therefore, it's something that is a global phenomenon. It's not just linked to this country. So for any leadership candidate to say we can solve inflation at a stroke is deluded. And so there have to be global solutions to the inflation problem. And the way to tackle inflation is, first of all, to remove the supply side constraints to the economy, like fuel, energy, and labor. And I think that, yes, governments can tinker at the edges with taxation. They can try and help at the margins. But this is one theme that is going to run beyond any local leadership election, or even any presidential or any other election. That is the price of fuel and the price of energy. And that is why the war in Ukraine is absolutely crucial to this problem of global inflation. And therefore, you have to tackle that in a way that actually benefits the world economy. Once the world economy regains confidence and energy prices at least stabilize, if not come down, then inflation will start to come down as well, because everyone in this country has fits of anxiety. You know, I mean, I was awake the other night wondering how I could pay a particular bill. Well, you know, I used not to have to do that. And I think, my thoughts are replicated through many millions of households in the UK and throughout the world. And it's not funny. It really isn't funny. Inflation eats away at the bedrock of economic competence and economic confidence. If you know, for example, if you're a pensioner and you know that there's 10% inflation, your pension's not going up by 10%, which means that you can afford less at the end of the year than you could at the beginning. And that's not going to give you confidence to go out and buy a new car, or it's not going to give you confidence to actually go out to a restaurant. So it's corrosive. The whole thing about inflation is it's corrosive and reduces people's choice and reduces their ability to ride it. So it's vital that the G7 and the G20 get together and actually have a plan. Now, it might require some pretty radical solutions, but unless they do that, then I think we're going to hobble along for the next few years until some of these basic problems are cracked. It takes leadership, and where have we got leadership?
We don't have it at the moment. But do you think also that inflation may cause a lot more civil unrest than what we're seeing at the moment? My wife was talking to a pharmacist the other day. Can't get things like paracetamol, for example, within the pharmacy there, supply stuck there. Then she's talking about other people who were saying, well, I can't afford to eat. Just about, then somebody else is saying, well, I just leave the car there, I walk now. So we're seeing obviously another rail strike on July the 27th. We're seeing a lot of unrest around this moment in time. Is this something that's going to grow, do you think?
Well, you and I have long memories, I think, Malcolm. I mean, I remember the winter of discontent in 1979,
Yes. Yeah.
where bodies lay unburied,
Yeah.
rubbish piled high in the streets. There is always a political price to pay for this. In 1979, we had the arrival of Mrs. Thatcher. I suspect that what is going to happen now is there will be, I think, increasing civil unrest. I don't think it'll be violent. It never is in this country, but it will. It will boil over in industrial disputes. It'll boil over in civil disobedience. It'll boil over in a lot of other ways until governments actually realise that this is something they have to deal with.
Yeah.
And one of the other problems, of course, is that Brexit makes it a whole lot worse. If you look at some of the advantages of Brexit, in a period of high inflation, it requires greater investment to overcome the difficulties of Brexit. And where's the money going to come from? And I think that again is part of the problem. Brexit provides an additional hurdle that is actually quite difficult to overcome. And when I hear some of these politicians saying, "Oh well, Brexit gives great opportunity," and those come out of the words of someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg, well, that's fine for Jacob Rees-Mogg to say things like that, but he's moved the headquarters of his financial services firm to Dublin. Why?
Yes.
Because he gets a better return because he's got better access to the European market.
Yeah.
I mean, the hypocrisy of it all is really serious. And I think it again boils down to trust. Can you trust these people who get up every night, interviewed on, by Sophie Rayworth or Lorna Koonsberg or whoever on the BBC or Peston on ITV? How can they be credible in those circumstances? How can we have trust in them? And I think a lot of people in this country feel politically disenfranchised. There isn't anyone they feel they can vote for. And that, again, is corrosive. If we don't have confidence in our leaders and our politicians, then we have serious problems. If we can't pay our bills, no matter how hard we try, no one's asking for handouts. That's not what, that's not what it's all about. It's purely an inability to survive. And in this country, of course, we will muddle through. But in places like Sri Lanka, it boiled over into street violence, and it will do so elsewhere in the world.
Yes, I felt very sorry about that because I worked in Sri Lanka for the EU straight after the tsunami, and there's such lovely people, working hard there. But let's talk about people, business leaders at this moment in time, because the forecast, well, it's sunny outside, but the forecast may be a bit cloudy, but they've got to take some action. And some sort of resilience action, I think, is needed. It's no use leaders sitting on their hands, because their people are saying, what are you going to do about it? So where's your thoughts go on what sort of resilience action a good business leader can take? I
think you have to look, if you're looking at a business leader, and I'm not talking about, the likes of Rolls-Royce or one of the oil majors. I'm just talking about, a company maybe that's turning over 10 or 20,000 pounds a month. What can they do? I think the first thing is to look at where your market is, where you're selling your goods, and where you think you can sell more, and actually devise a plan to meet your aspirations. Those are the most important things, and work out the resources you're going to need to be able to do that. At least if you get it down on paper, you'll know whether it's possible or not. And I think that's really important. And of course, you have to convince other people that what you're thinking about is doable.
Yes.
So it might be, the family, it might be your board of directors, it might be your financial providers. You've got to be able to convince them what you're talking about is sensible. And in these uncertain times, you've got to be sure about what you're doing, because if you're not sure about what you're doing, no one else will be.
Yeah, I think also you need to know what the market trends, where they're going to. I'm working with a podiatry company, I'm working with a security company, and they're all being affected by external matters that they wouldn't normally have to be to be concerned about, for example, such things as social value and corporate responsibility, to win decent contracts. So know what's happening within your marketplace, because it's easy to be unobservant, isn't it?
It certainly is. I mean, there are certain sort of standouts that I would take from the present global circumstance, and that is that anything to do with greening the economy and greening the environment is going to attract support. Yes. Although, there's a lot of resistance to it too. But that is going to attract support, and it's also going to attract financial capital. So I think that's something which I think is good. I think alternative energy sources alongside that greener image and greener policy is also something that will gain traction. I think also, yes, people are becoming more socially responsible. So people are perhaps more likely to invest in an app about how to do things more easily, rather than, buy a second car or buy an extra bottle of wine. But whatever it is, I think people are becoming much more socially responsible. Or maybe invest in a food bank. This is what is in demand today in Britain and in the global economy. There is going to be much more social philanthropy because that is required. And I think that those people who are social philanthropists will have to think very hard about where they put their money, not for their own self-interest, but for where it really matters. And I was reading this morning, Bill Gates says he doesn't want to be in the top 20 rich list within 5 years. Well, he did say that in 2010, and since then his wealth has doubled. But but I think he is genuinely putting his money where his mouth is. Yeah. He's within striking distance of eliminating malaria. Now, that would be a fantastic achievement. A fantastic achievement. And I think, there are people in the world, and I take comfort from this, there are people in the world who do things not for themselves, but for society as a whole. We need a lot more. We need a lot more of them. And wouldn't it be great if some of our political leaders adopted the same philosophy?
Yes, and I could think of one or two, but a final question, final question. The UK is still respected in many parts of the world, primarily because of our humanity, culture, and integrity, along with innovation. Now, if you were to be given that thing you mentioned before, the Harry Potter magic wand, to help the UK capitalize on these important differentials, how would you use it?
I've been thinking about this for a few days since you mentioned it to me, and it's actually quite a difficult question to answer in a very short space of time. I think what one needs to do, yes, we do have as a nation historical virtues, if you like. The fact that our word could be relied upon, well, that's been called into question. The fact that we are good trading partners, the fact that we have a certain standing in the world in terms of justice, well, that could be called into question too. So there are a whole heap of things that are going to be called into question. And the one thing I think would make more difference than anything else is to have a leadership that people respect, have a civil service that is able to carry out the wishes of the leadership without compromise, without having to dodge the bullets. And we need an administration that is respected, not just at home, but abroad. And I think that's really, really important. And we're only going to get that if all of us buy into that as well.
Excellent. Great answer, Hugh. Great answer. And let's hope it happens. I've thoroughly enjoyed our live chat. I think we should do it more often because it spurs lots of thinking between us as well, rather than, should we say, the coldness of doing a pre-recorded audio. So are you up for that, Hugh?
Very much so. Yeah, I prefer it, actually. I think it provides an interaction, and it provides thought and stimulus, which I hope is shared by our audience too.